She ironed his shirt the morning they put him in the ground. Not because anyone asked her to, but because Buries had spent 17 years making sure Elias left the house looking like somebody loved him, and she was not about to stop on the last day she would ever see his face. She is a nurse. She has held the hands of dying strangers at 2 in the morning. She has called time of death on children younger than her son. She knows what grief looks like from the outside, the hollow eyes, the slow movements, the way a person's whole body seems to forget how to carry itself. She has seen it 100 times in that hospital, and she always thought she understood it. She did not understand it. They told her Elias drowned. They told her it was an accident. They told her he slipped at some pool party out on the wealthy side of town, and by the time anyone pulled him out, it was already too late. The police chief himself came to her door with his hat in his hands and his eyes full of something that looked like sympathy, and she stood there in her scrubs after a 12-hour shift, and she listened to every word he said, and she believed him. She believed him because what mother wouldn't? She buried her son on a Thursday. The whole church came. Women she hadn't spoken to in years pressed her hands and told her Elias was with Jesus now, and she nodded and thanked them because that was what you did. Buries had been doing what you were supposed to do her entire life, working double shifts in a county that paid her less than she was worth, raising her son alone in a house with a leaking roof she couldn't afford to fix, smiling at doctors who spoke to her like she was slow, being careful, being quiet, being grateful for whatever scraps this town decided to toss her way. She buried her son on a Thursday, and she went home to a house that still smelled like him, and she sat in the dark on the edge of his bed, and she did not sleep. 48 hours after they put Elias in the ground, her phone buzzed with a message from a number she did not recognize. She almost didn't open it. She wishes sometimes that she hadn't, because what she saw on that screen, a grainy, shaking, 17-second video pulled from a dead Snapchat account, did not bring her peace. It did not bring her closure. It cracked her open in a way the grief alone never could, because grief you can survive. Grief is just love with nowhere to go. But the truth about what Hunter Alcott did to her son in that pool, and what his father's money made disappear before sunrise, that is something else entirely. This is the story of what Buries did next, and I need you to understand something before we begin. She is not a villain. She is not a hero. She is a mother who buried her child and then learned his death was a lie, and she lived in a county where the system was so rotten, so thoroughly owned by one powerful family, that justice was never going to come through the front door. So Buries went around the back. Stay with me, because this story does not end the way they wanted it to. Welcome to Midnight Romance, a place for stories about love, desire, and the choices that change us, told the way they actually feel. Comment where in the world you are watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel. Now strap up, let's dive into this bombshell. Buries ironed his shirt the morning they buried him. Nobody asked her to do that. There was no reason to do it. The boy was gone, but she stood at that ironing board at 5 in the morning in the dark, pressing the collar of his white dress shirt over and over again until it was perfect, until there was not a single crease left in it. Because that was what she did. Every school morning for 17 years, she made sure Elias left the house looking like somebody loved him, and she was not going to stop on the last morning she would ever dress him. That is the kind of woman Buries is. She works at Calhoun County Regional Hospital, floor nurse, has been for 11 years. She is on her feet before the sun comes up, and she does not sit down until it is already dark again. She earns less than she should. She says less than she wants to. She smiles at people who do not smile back, and she keeps moving because that is what you do when you are a black woman in a county like this one. You keep moving. You keep your head down. You do your job and you go home, and you love the people you have. Because in a place like Calhoun County, love is sometimes the only thing that belongs to you. Elias was hers. 17 years old, Quiet kid, smart. The kind of boy who reads the back of cereal boxes just because he is curious. The kind of boy who remembers your birthday and shows up with something small but perfect. He was not popular. He was not trying to be. He was just good. Genuinely, simply good. And Bernice knew, the way mothers know things without being told, that the world had not yet figured out what it had in him. She found out on a Tuesday night. She was stepping out of a patient's room at 9:47 when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail. She was exhausted. Her feet hurt. She had 2 more hours left on her shift and a leaking pipe at home she still had not found the money to fix. But she answered. Because Elias was 17, and sometimes teenagers call from strange phones. The voice on the other end was careful, measured, the kind of careful that people learn when they have to deliver news that breaks things. He said there had been an incident. He said there was a pool party on the east side of town. He said her son. He said her son. She does not remember driving to the morgue. She has tried to remember it and she cannot. One moment she was in the hospital parking lot, and the next she was standing under white lights looking at her boy on a steel table, and someone was asking her to confirm his name. Elias. His name was Elias. She drove home alone. She did not call anyone. She walked through the front door and she stood in the kitchen for a long time without turning on the lights. Then she walked to his room and she sat on the edge of his bed and she stayed there. The police came the next morning. The chief himself, hat in his hands, voice full of something that looked like sympathy. He told her it was an accident. He told her Elias had slipped near the deep end of the pool. He told her the kids at the party were all in shock, that no one could have gotten to him in time, that these things happen and they are nobody's fault. He said it so cleanly. He said it so easily. And Bernice sat across from him in her own living room and she nodded, and she thanked him for coming, because that is what you do. You thank the man with the badge. You do not ask too many questions. You do not make him feel uncomfortable in the house he came to out of the goodness of his heart. She thanked him and she showed him to the door. The case was closed within 18 hours. Accidental drowning. She found out later, much later, that she had never seen paperwork move that fast in Calhoun County. Not for anything. The county where it takes 3 months to fix a pothole somehow closed a death investigation before the body was even cold. She did not know why yet. She just knew her son was gone. The funeral was on a Thursday. The church was full. Women she had not spoken to in years held her hands and told her Elias was with Jesus now, and she nodded at every single one of them because what else do? You nod. You accept the casseroles people bring to your door. You sit in the front pew in your black dress and you stare at the closed casket and you try to remember how to breathe like a person. She got through it. She got home. She changed out of her dress. She sat on Elias' bed again, same spot, same stillness. And then she saw the chips. Half a bag of tackies on his desk, just sitting there where he left them. Because he was 17 and 17-year-olds leave half-eaten bags of chips on their desks, and they do not think about the fact that one day that bag might still be sitting there, and they will not be. That was when Bernice cried. She cried until her body had nothing left to give. And then she lay down on her son's pillow, and she closed her eyes. 48 hours later, her phone buzzed. Unknown number, no name, just a message, 7 words. I was there, you deserve to know. And then a video. 11 seconds long. Bernice pressed play. She watched it 4 times. The first time she did not fully understand what she was seeing. The video was shaky. Whoever filmed it was moving, trying not to be noticed, and the music from the party was loud enough to make the whole thing feel chaotic and unclear. She thought maybe she was wrong. Maybe she was seeing what she wanted to see because grief does that to people. It makes you look for someone to blame. So she watched it again. And this time she saw him. Tall boy, broad shoulders, red cup in his right hand, the kind of boy who has never once in his life been told no by anyone who mattered. He was drunk. You could see it in the way he was moving, loose and reckless, laughing at something nobody else seemed to find funny. And then Elias walked past him. Just walked past him. That was all it took. The tall boy reached out with one arm and shoved Elias from behind. Hard. Not a joke. Not playing around. With intention. Elias' arms went out in front of him, and his head caught the concrete edge of the pool on the way down, and then he was in the water, and he was not moving, and the tall boy stood there looking at what he had done. And then he turned to the people around him. And he said it, clear enough to read his lips even through the shaking, even through the noise. Tell them he slipped. Nobody saw nothing. Buries sat on her son's bed, and she watched those words come out of that boy's mouth, and she felt something shift inside her. Not break. She was past breaking. This was something different, something colder and harder and much more quiet than grief. She needed to know who he was. It did not take long. The anonymous number would not respond to her messages, but Buries is not a foolish woman. She asked around carefully. She described what she saw in the video, the house, the pool, the boy. Someone who went to the same school as Elias told her the party was at the Alcott property on Millbrook Road. Hunter Alcott, 20 years old, Judge Raymond Alcott's only son. She sat with that name for a long time. Then she got in her car and drove to Darnell. She had not spoken to Elias' father in almost 4 years. He was living out past the highway in a trailer that had seen better decades, and when he opened the door and saw her face, he already knew something was wrong. She did not soften it. She just handed him the phone and let him watch. She watched him watch it. She saw the grief on his face, real grief. She will give him that. Whatever Darnell is, he loved Elias in his own broken way. But she also saw the exact moment the grief got crowded out by something else. Something smaller and more shameful. Fear. He handed the phone back to her and he said, Buries, you have to let this go. She asked him what he just said. He said it again. Let it go. He said Judge Alcott was not the kind of man you took on in this county. He said the man had been running Calhoun County for 20 years, that he had the police, the courts, the media, all of it in his pocket. He said Buries needed to think about herself, her job, her safety. He said this while their son was 4 days in the ground. She did not say anything back to him. There was nothing to say. She just looked at him for a moment, the way you look at something you used to believe in, and then she walked back to her car. She drove straight to the precinct. She went in through the front door and asked to speak to someone about a closed case. The desk sergeant looked at her the way desk sergeants in this county look at black women who come in asking questions, not hostile, not yet just blank, waiting to see which way this was going to go. She told him it was about her son, about Elias Williams, the drowning 2 weeks ago. They put her in a back office. The chief came in 10 minutes later, same man who had stood at her door with his hat in his hands. He sat down across from her, and he folded his hands on the desk, and he gave her the same measured, careful expression he always gave her, and she showed him the video without saying a word. He watched it. He did not say anything when it finished. He just held out his hand and said he would need to hold onto the phone as evidence while they looked into it. She gave it to him. She watched him set it down on the desk between them. She watched him unlock it. She watched him open the video file, and then she watched him delete it. He did it slowly, like it was nothing, like she was nothing. Then he looked up at her and told her that continuing to pursue a closed investigation with fabricated evidence was a criminal offense in this state. He said the word fabricated, looking directly into her eyes. He said if she came back into this precinct with this story again, he would have her arrested for criminal harassment. Then he slid her phone across the desk, like he was doing her a favor. Buries picked up the phone. She said thank you. She walked out of the office through the front door across the parking lot and she got into her car. She sat there. The engine was off. The windows were up. The afternoon was hot and sticky the way deep south afternoons always are, that thick pressing heat that makes you feel like the world is leaning on you. She sat in that car for a long time. She was a poor black woman in Calhoun County with no money for a private lawyer and no connections and a deleted file, and a police chief who had just told her, plainly and without blinking, that her son's life did not matter enough to investigate. She knew the system was not going to move for her. She had always known it, the way you know things you never say out loud. But knowing it and having it sit across a desk and look you in the eye are two very different things. She picked up her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she had not pressed in 6 years. Leon. She stared at it for a moment. Then she called. He picked up on the second ring. She had not planned what she was going to say. She had not rehearsed it or thought it through the way she usually thinks things through. She just pressed his name and put the phone to her ear, and when she heard his voice, low and steady, the same as she remembered, something in her chest that had been locked for days just came loose. She told him everything. She did not cry while she told it. She was past crying in the way you get past things that are too big for tears. She spoke clearly and she spoke slowly and she laid it all out for him from the beginning. The call from the police, the funeral, the video, Darnell, the precinct, the chief's face when he deleted the file. Leon listened. He did not interrupt her once, did not make sounds of disbelief or ask her to repeat herself. He just listened the way some people know how to listen, with their whole attention, giving you space to say the thing all the way to the end. When she finished, there was a silence. Not an uncomfortable one. Just the kind of silence that means someone is taking what you said seriously enough to sit with it for a moment before they respond. Then he said, "I'm on my way." That was it. 4 words. No questions about whether it was a good idea or what the plan was or what exactly he was supposed to do when he got there. Just, "I'm on my way." She heard him moving around on his end, keys, a door, and then the call ended. She drove home and she waited. She had met Leon the first week of her freshman year at Alcorn State University. Biology class, 8 in the morning, the kind of class that separates the serious students from the ones who signed up without checking the time. Leon was already in his seat when she arrived, notebook open, pen in hand, not performing readiness but actually ready. She sat next to him because the seat was empty, and because something about a man who shows up early to an 8 a.m. class felt safe. He made her laugh that first day. She does not even remember what he said. She just remembers laughing and thinking this one is different. They dated for 14 months. They were young and they were figuring themselves out, and life eventually pulled them in different directions the way it does, gently and without malice, the way rivers split around a rock and keep moving. They ended well. No bitterness. No ugly last conversation. Just 2 people who cared about each other agreeing that the road was taking them somewhere different. She had thought about him over the years. Not constantly. Just sometimes in the quiet moments, the way you think about the people who made you feel like yourself at a time when you were still learning who that was. He arrived just after midnight. She heard his truck pull up and she went to the door before he even knocked. He looked the same. A little older around the eyes, the way men get when they have been through things. He was bigger than she remembered, broader through the shoulders, but his face was exactly the same. That same steadiness. That same quality she had never fully found a word for, not calmness exactly, more like a decision. Like he had decided a long time ago that panic was not going to be useful to him, and he had simply stopped making room for it. He came inside. She made coffee because she needed something to do with her hands. They sat at the kitchen table and she told him everything again, this time slower with more detail. He asked a few questions, quiet ones, not the kind designed to poke holes but the kind designed to understand. When she was done, he looked at her across the table, and he asked her one thing. "What do you want, Buries? Not what do you need, not what are you thinking about doing. What do you want? Because those are different questions, and he knew it." She thought about it. She thought about it honestly, the way she had not allowed herself to think about it before because the answer frightened her a little. She did not want Hunter Alcott dead. She wanted to look at him. She wanted to stand in front of that boy and say her son's name out loud and make him hear it. She wanted a confession on tape, something she could send to people beyond this county, state investigators, journalists, federal tip lines, the NAACP, anyone whose hands the Alcott family money had not yet reached. She wanted the truth to exist somewhere outside of her own body. Leon nodded. He said okay. That was the moment. Not dramatic, not loud. Just two people at a kitchen table at 1 in the morning deciding together that they were going to do something. They spent the next day being careful. Leon drove, Buries directed. They were not following Hunter for anything violent. They were learning his pattern, where he went, what hours he kept, which places he frequented alone, because they needed him alone. They needed him somewhere without his father's people standing 2 feet behind him. It did not take long. Hunter Alcott was not hiding. Why would he be? As far as he was concerned, this whole thing had been handled. The nurse buried her son. The case was closed. His father made 3 phone calls and life went on. Hunter was moving through his days the same way he always had, easy and careless, the way people move when they have never once had to think about consequence. He had a habit. Late nights, a few times a week, he stopped at the same gas station convenience store off Route 9 just past the highway exit. Bright lights, empty lot. The kind of place that is always open and always quiet after 10 because nobody in this county has much reason to be out there at that hour. They sat in Leon's truck across the road on a Wednesday night, and they watched him go in. Leon turned to her. She turned to him. She said Wednesday. He said Wednesday. They drove home and they did not talk much after that. There was nothing left to plan. The plan was simple and it was not violent, and it was not going to go wrong because they were not going to let it go wrong. They were going to walk into that store and they were going to corner that boy in an aisle, and Buries was going to look him in the eye and say her son's name, and she was going to record every word that came out of his mouth. That was the plan. That was all it was supposed to be. They got there first. Leon parked 2 streets over and they walked. Not running, not rushing, just 2 people moving through a warm southern night like they had somewhere reasonable to be. The air smelled like cut grass and gasoline and something sweet from the fields further out. Buries noticed those things. She noticed them clearly, the way you notice small details when your body knows something significant is about to happen. The store was exactly what it always was. Fluorescent lights humming behind the glass, a wall of drinks in the back, snack aisles running the length of the place, low shelves, the kind of store where you can see from one end to the other without trying. One cashier, a teenage boy, maybe 16, headphones in, not looking at anything except whatever was on his phone behind the register. They went in. They positioned themselves in the back aisle near the drink coolers and they waited. Leon stood slightly behind Buries and to her left. He did not say anything. She did not say anything. They just stood there in the cold air coming off the coolers and they waited. 12 minutes. Then headlights swept across the front window and Hunter Alcott's truck rolled into the lot. Buries watched him come through the door. He was in a t-shirt and shorts, loose and casual, still carrying himself like a boy who has never once in his life felt the ground shift under his feet. He grabbed a basket from the front and started moving toward the snacks. Then he turned into the back aisle. He saw Buries and he stopped. The recognition was immediate. She watched it move across his face, first confusion, then something that sharpened fast. He knew exactly who she was. His father had made sure of that. She could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, the quick inventory of the situation, who was here, what this was, whether he needed to be afraid. Buries did not move. She held up her phone so he could see it clearly. She told him she was recording. Her voice was steady. She had promised herself it would be steady, and it was. She said she knew what happened at the pool. She said she had seen the video. She said his name once, and then she said her son's name. Elias. She said it the way you say something you have been holding carefully for a long time, precisely, without rushing it. She asked him to tell her the truth. Hunter Alcott looked at her for a moment that stretched out longer than it should have, and she saw something move through him that she had hoped might be remorse, some small crack of it, some human recognition of what he had taken from her. She looked for it because she is the kind of woman who still looks for the humanity in people even when they have given her no reason to. It was not remorse. His face went from calculating to furious in the space of a single breath, the specific fury of a person who has never been made to feel small and cannot tolerate the experience. He was not scared of what he did. He was not scared of her. He was angry that she was here, angry that she was still pushing, angry that she had the nerve to stand in a gas station aisle and say her dead son's name to his face like it had anything to do with him. His hand moved to his waistband. Buries did not fully process what was happening until she heard the sound. The shot was enormous in that small space. It cracked off the walls and the shelving units and the linoleum floor, and it was so loud and so sudden that, for a half-second, she did not understand that it had hit her. Then her left arm went hot and then wrong, a burning, tearing wrongness that started at the outside of her bicep and radiated all the way up to her shoulder. And she hit the shelving unit behind her and things fell, bags of chips, boxes of crackers, raining down around her, and her phone skidded away across the floor. She heard Leon move. She did not see it. She was against the shelving unit with her arm on fire and the world tilted sideways. But she heard him. One sound, one motion, and then two shots fired close together. Then silence. The kind of silence that comes after something that cannot be undone. She pushed herself upright against the shelving. Her arm was bleeding, a long, ragged groove across the outside of the muscle, bad but not fatal, and she knew it was not fatal the way nurses know these things, automatically, even when the blood is their own. She pressed her other hand against it and she looked up. Leon was already beside her. He checked her arm first. His hands were steady. His face was the same as it always was, that decision he had made a long time ago not to panic, holding. He looked at the wound and he looked at her face and he said, you're okay, and she nodded because she was. Hunter Alcott was on the floor at the end of the aisle. He was not moving. Leon had a registered firearm. He had carried it legally for 15 years. He had drawn it once in his life before tonight, at a gas station in Birmingham 6 years ago when a man tried to carjack the woman he was with, and he had not fired at that time because the man ran. He was not reckless with it. He was not the kind of man who wanted to use it. He was the kind of man who carried it because the world is what it is, and sometimes the person next to you needs protecting. Buries had needed protecting. The cashier at the front was on his feet with his phone in his hand. She could hear him talking, fast and frightened, telling someone the address. She could hear sirens already, faint and distant but coming. Leon looked at her. She looked at him. They did not say anything out loud, but they did not need to. They both knew. Running would make them into something they were not. Running would hand the story to the people who were already waiting to tell it wrong. They had not gone in there to kill anyone. They had gone in there for the truth, and a boy with his father's money and his father's arrogance had pulled a gun and fired it at a grieving mother who had done nothing in her life but work and love her son and try to do things the right way. They were not going to run from that. Leon set his firearm carefully on the floor and stepped back from it. Buries straightened up and kept her hand pressed against her arm. They walked to the front of the store together and they sat down on the floor near the entrance, backs against the glass, hands visible, and they waited. The first patrol car pulled into the lot 2 minutes later. Then another. Then another. Blue and red light pouring through the glass and washing over everything inside, over the scattered merchandise in the back aisle, over the cashier who was pressed into the corner behind his register, over Buries and Leon sitting on the floor with their hands open and their faces calm. The officers came through the door with their weapons drawn, and they were shouting, and Buries kept her hands up, and she kept her face calm, and she kept breathing. She had done nothing wrong. She told herself that clearly, and she held on to it. She had no idea, yet how little that was going to matter. Judge Raymond Alcott did not sleep that night. Buries found that out later from a source she will never name. He was on the phone before his son's body was even off that convenience store floor. Not grieving, not sitting in a chair somewhere with his head in his hands, the way a father is supposed to sit when he loses a child. He was working, making calls, pulling threads, because Raymond Alcott had spent 20 years building a machine in this county, and the machine had one purpose, and that purpose was to protect the things that belonged to him. Hunter had belonged to him. And now Buries and Leon were going to pay for that. The charges came down fast. Capital murder. Both of them. The prosecutor's office moved with the same impossible speed that closed Elia's case, the same speed that only ever seemed to exist in this county when powerful people needed something to happen quickly. No bail. The judge at the arraignment, a man who had appeared in photographs with Raymond Alcott at 3 different fundraisers, looked at them both across the courtroom and said the words "remand into custody" without blinking. They put Buries in a cell that smelled like mold and old concrete. She lay on that cot the first night and she stared at the ceiling and she thought about Elias, not about the trial, not about what was coming, just about him, the way he laughed with his whole face, the way he called her mama even at 17, never mom, always mama, like he wanted her to know he still meant it. She thought about the chips on his desk, and she wondered if she had remembered to bring them with her when she packed that one bag before Leon drove her away from the house. And she had not, and that hurt in a way that was entirely separate from everything else that was hurting. She slept eventually. She is stronger than people give her credit for. She always has been. Leon's attorney arrived the next morning. His name was Marcus Webb. He was out of Jackson, late 50s, the kind of man who wore his experience on his face without apology. He had spent 20 years taking cases that powerful people assumed were already decided. He sat across from Leon in the consultation room and he listened, and then he sat across from Buries and he listened again, and when he was done listening, he told them both the same thing. Do not speak to anyone. Do not lose hope. The truth always leaves a trail. Buries wanted to believe him. The trial began 6 weeks later in the same county where Raymond Alcott had presided for 19 years. Webb had fought for a change of venue and lost. The jury pool was drawn from a county where the Alcott name was on a courthouse, a scholarship fund, and a wing of the public library. Buries sat at the defense table in her best clothes, and she watched 12 strangers file into the jury box, and she tried to read their faces and she could not. The prosecution told a story. They told it well. She will admit that. They painted Buries as a woman destroyed by grief who had recruited a dangerous man to hunt down and execute the innocent young son of a respected community figure. They used words like premeditated. They used words like calculated. They said she had tracked Hunter Alcott for days before the shooting, which was true, and they let that truth do the work of hiding everything that explained it. They did not mention Elias except to call him her son briefly once as context. They did not say his name like he was a person. They said it like he was a footnote. Buries kept her face still through all of it. Webb did not raise his voice once during the entire trial. He did not perform outrage or pound tables. He just worked. Quietly and methodically, The way people work when they are completely sure of what they have and they know it will speak for itself when the time comes. He filed the subpoena for the convenience store security footage on the third day. The prosecution fought it for 2 days straight. They argued relevance, they argued procedure, they argued chain of custody, they argued everything they could think of to keep that footage from playing in that courtroom. And the state judge, not Alcott, a judge brought in from 2 counties over because even the court administration understood the conflict of interest, overruled every single objection. The footage played on a Tuesday morning. The courtroom went completely quiet. Not the polite quiet of people being respectful, the specific quiet of people seeing something that removes every question from the room. The footage was clear, clearer than anyone expected. It showed Buries with her phone up. It showed the confrontation in the aisle. It showed Hunter's hand moving to his waistband. It showed the shot. It showed Buries hit the shelving unit. It showed Leon draw his weapon only after she had already been hit, only after the bullet had already found her arm. 2 shots, fired in defense of a wounded woman by a licensed carrier. That was what the footage showed, not a premeditated hit, not an execution, a man protecting someone he loved from a boy who had already pulled the trigger. Webb let it play twice. Then he called his final witness. Her name was Destiny, 19 years old. She had been at the pool party the night Elias died. She was the unknown number. She was the one who had filmed the video on a phone she thought was on Snapchat, the one who had found it still saved in her deleted folder 2 days after the funeral, and had sat with it for hours trying to decide what kind of person she wanted to be. She chose to be the kind who tells the truth. She took the stand and she shook the entire time she was up there, not from dishonesty, from fear, because she knew what family she was testifying against and she knew what county she was sitting in, and she did it anyway. She described the party. She described the pool. She described Hunter's red cup and Elias walking past him and the shove and the sound of his head on the concrete, and the moment Hunter turned to everyone watching and told them what to say. The prosecution objected 17 times during her testimony. 17 times the state judge said overruled. When Destiny stepped down from the stand, she walked past the defense table, and she did not look at Buries directly, but Buries looked at her. She looked at this 19-year-old girl who had carried this alone for weeks and decided the weight was not hers to keep. Buries wanted to say something to her, but there were no words that were large enough, so she just looked, and she hoped the girl felt it. The jury was out for less than 4 hours. When they came back, Buries sat with her hands folded on the table in front of her, and she breathed slowly and she thought about Elias one more time. Not the pool, not the video, just him, standing in the kitchen eating cereal on a Saturday morning, still in his pajamas, reading the back of the box. The foreperson stood up. Not guilty. On all counts. Buries did not collapse. She did not scream. She sat very still for a moment, and she closed her eyes and she breathed. Leon put his hand over hers on the table, and she felt the warmth of it, and she breathed again. Raymond Alcott was still in his seat across the courtroom. She looked at him. She let herself look at him fully, this man who had deleted her son from the record and tried to delete her from the world. He looked smaller than she expected, not defeated exactly, more like a man who had discovered for the first time that there was a ceiling above him, that the power he had carried for 20 years had limits he had never thought to test, because no one had ever made him test them before. A black nurse from the struggling side of Calhoun County had made him test them. Webb found her in the hallway afterward, and he spoke quietly and quickly. He said, "Go tonight. Do not wait for morning. Get your things and go before he recovers enough to make another call." She did not argue. Leon's truck was 2 blocks from the courthouse. She had 1 bag packed and waiting at a friend's house nearby. She went and got it. She met Leon at the truck, and he took the bag and put it in the back without a word, and she got in the passenger seat and he started the engine. She had the photo of Elias, the one from when he was 13, standing in front of his school on the first day, backpack too big for his frame, grinning at her like the world was something he could not wait to get into. She had the chips too. She had gone back for them before she left the house the night they drove away. She did not know why exactly. She just could not leave them. They pulled out of Calhoun County just before 11 at night. The highway was empty and long, and the headlights pushed into the dark ahead of them. Leon did not ask where they were going, and Bernice did not have an answer yet. They would figure it out. They always figured things out, the people who have spent their whole lives having to. At some point, Leon's hand moved across the center console and found hers. She did not move it away. Elia's was still gone. That was not going to change. No verdict changes that. No acquittal fills that space. She was going to carry him every day for the rest of her life, in the photo and the chips and the ironed shirt and every quiet moment that belonged to just the two of them. But his name was true now. Elias Williams, 17 years old, a good boy, a boy who deserved better than what this county gave him. And the people who tried to make him disappear were going to spend the rest of their lives knowing that a woman with nothing but the truth and the nerve to use it had walked into their courtroom and walked back out again. Scarred, grieving, alive. Ready? Now I want to ask you something before you go. When Bernice walked into that convenience store, she was not looking for a fight. She was looking for accountability. She just wanted that boy to say her son's name and mean it. But the system had taken everything from her, the evidence, the case, the phone, even the father of her child. She had nothing left except one man who showed up without being asked and one decision she made in a parking lot. So here is the question. If you were Bernice, what would you have done differently? And be honest with yourself, because it is easy to say you would have walked away. It is easy to say you would have trusted the system and found another way. But when the system looks you in the eye and deletes the proof of your son's murder in front of your face, what does trust even mean anymore? And here is the second one. Hunter Alcott fired first. The camera proved it. But if that camera had been broken that night, if the footage had been dark or corrupted or simply never existed, Bernice and Leon would be on death row right now for a murder the law would have called premeditated. So what does justice actually mean in a country where the truth only saves you if someone happened to record it? Think about that. If this story moved something in you, if Bernice's name is going to stay with you for a while, hit the subscribe button and stay close. There are more stories coming. Stories about ordinary people who were handed extraordinary unfairness and had to decide what they were made of. You do not want to miss what is next.